Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. The first thing we're going to do in reading is review our second fairy tale, Rumpelstiltskin, and we'll go over the two activities that you did for this fairy tale. The first activity is your fairy tale elements story chart, and we'll go ahead and go through the different things and see if maybe you included all of these things. Maybe there are some things you didn't think about. And you can add them to your chart if you want to. You don't have to, as long as you pay attention. And if there's something you missed, make sure you go, oh, I didn't think about that, or I didn't realize that was something from the story. So pay close attention just in case you missed anything. So let's start off with the opening sentence. Once upon a time. Of course, that's a really common opening sentence in our fairy tales. It was the same thing in Sleeping Beauty as well. This fairy tale had a couple different elements of magic. The first was that the little man magically appears. And the second is that the straw turns into gold. The setting in this fairy tale is the king's palace. And I added a detail underneath it. I added the rooms filled with straw because throughout the fairy tale, the king takes her to different and bigger rooms filled with more and more straw. And then the last one I added is kingdom, because towards the end of the story, the queen sends the messenger out throughout the entire kingdom to find all of the names in the kingdom. So that's an important setting, an important detail to add to settings. If we go to the bottom, you might notice some funny looking things under good and bad characters. You'll notice I actually put some characters in good characters and bad characters. But I'm going to explain why I did that. The first character is the miller. I put him in good characters because overall, he is a pretty good character. He doesn't do anything really bad in the story, and he's not an evil villain. However, in the beginning of the story, he does make up a lie when he's boasting about his daughter. And when he makes up that lie, he creates a really big problem for his daughter. His lie was that his daughter could spin straw into gold, and she couldn't really do that. But since he made that promise, he created a really big problem for her because she couldn't do it. I also put the king in good characters because, again, overall, he's a good character. He doesn't do anything majorly wrong, and he's not an evil villain. However, he does get greedier and greedier for gold. And he treats the girl kind of unfairly. He makes her spin all of the straw into gold by sunup, which is not very kind. So I also put him in bad characters. And then, of course, the miller's daughter is good. She doesn't do anything bad in the story. The queen's baby is also a good character. And the messenger is definitely a good character. He's the one at the end of the story who finds out the name, takes it back to the queen, and ends up saving her baby. So we could even call him the hero of the story. And then if we go back to bad characters, I put Maine above Little Man / Rumpelstiltskin because he is the main bad character in the story. He is definitely the villain, the evil character. If we go to problem and solution, you'll notice again, just like in Sleeping Beauty, there's more than one problem and more than one solution. The first problem is that the miller's daughter cannot spin gold out of the straw. He promised that she could, but she couldn't. The solution is that the little man spins the straw into gold for her every time. The second problem is that the little man makes her promise to give him her baby unless she can guess his name. The solution is that the messenger hears the little man singing his name, so he goes to the queen and gives her the name, and the queen gets to keep her baby. So lots of really great details in this story. The second activity you did was your compare and contrast Venn diagram. Now, for this activity, you were supposed to compare and contrast two characters from the story. Some of you compare and contrasted the entire story, and that's okay. But if you did that, I really want you to pay attention so that you can see the details that compare and contrast just two of the characters, okay? So the first set of characters I did were the evil characters in the story, the villains. I did the 13th Fairy and Rumpelstiltskin. So let's look at compare first. Of course, both of these characters are villains. They are the evil characters. Both of them are also magical characters. The 13th Fairy has magical powers to put a curse on the baby, and Rumpelstiltskin has magical powers to spin the straw into gold. The next comparison or similarity is that both characters have something to do with a baby. They involve a baby. However, that's also a difference. If you look at the 13th Fairy side, she puts a curse on the baby. Rumpelstiltskin wants the baby from the story. So that's a difference. Even though they had a similarity with a baby, they also had a difference. We've talked about how that can happen in stories. The next similarity is that they both have something to do with a spinning wheel. But again, how they use the spinning wheel is different. So the 13th Fairy uses the wheel for bad. Rumpelstiltskin uses the wheel for good. He spins the straw into gold. The 13th Fairy uses the wheel to curse the baby to die. Another difference between the characters is that the 13th Fairy is never good in the story. She starts off evil, and that's just the way she is. She is never good. Rumpelstiltskin started off good. He was helping the girl. Now, he was greedy because he wanted something from her, but he did have some good characteristics. And in both stories, both of the villains got mad. The 13th Fairy got mad because she wasn't invited to the party. And Rumpelstiltskin got mad because the queen guessed his name, so he couldn't have the baby. So if you look carefully, these are some really detailed similarities and differences between the characters. Those are the types of similarities and differences I want you to be thinking about as you hear fairy tales and as you compare and contrast different characters from fairy tales. Now, if you didn't do the evil characters, you might have done the good characters. So I'm going to put up the next one. Now this Venn diagram compares and contrasts the good characters in the stories. Sleeping Beauty was a good character, and the miller's daughter was a good character. And they have a lot of similarities. So the first similarity is that, of course, they're both girls, but they have differences between them. Sleeping Beauty was born a princess into a royal family. The miller's daughter was born a regular girl into a poor family. She was not royalty. In Sleeping Beauty, her dad is a king. The miller's daughter's dad is a miller. Remember, he was a man who made wheat, the grain. In both stories, though, they have a problem about a spindle. In Sleeping Beauty, she poked her finger on the spindle. And in Rumpelstiltskin, the miller's daughter, couldn't spin the straw into gold using the spindle. Both girls have a bad character that causes a problem for them. character that causes problems for Sleeping Beauty is the 13th Fairy, and the character that causes problems for the miller's daughter is Rumpelstiltskin. Both characters get married and live in a palace and live happily ever after. We know that the prince woke Sleeping Beauty up, and that's how she ended up marrying the prince and living in the palace. And in the miller's daughter, the king promised to make the miller's daughter his wife, and he did, and that's how she got to live in the palace and become the queen. In both stories, the girls have some interaction with magic. In Sleeping Beauty, magic cursed the girl. And in Rumpelstiltskin, magic helped the miller's daughter. So this was a review of the activities that you completed for Rumpelstiltskin and Sleeping Beauty. If you want to go back and add anything to your activities, you absolutely can, especially if you're keeping them in a journal at home. That way you can always go back to them as a resource for information. Stay tuned to our next video for our next fairy tale read aloud.